In the book, The Psychology of Blacks, an Afro-American Perspective, Joseph L. White, an advocate of the reformist school, identifies and explores behavior, lifestyle, and culture of African Americans in an effort to compare and contrast different principles of psychology offered by white mainstream and black psychologists. White ascribes to blacks what he considers the basic foundational elements of black psychology: openness, interdependence, susceptibility to tragedy and resilience, the deployment of the oral tradition as an instrument for creative synthesis, and the value of direct experience. According to White, the black ethos in tragedy and the repeated experience of political defeat and disappointment are not associated with psychological trauma. Unlike the European, White argues, African Americans keep the faith, remain cool as they steadily seek to promote behaviors that are not self-defeating. Traditional, as the white mainstream psychology, writes White, fails to develop corrective measures in their assessment of black children and family life. He borrowed the term the middle class ruling stick, which is referring to the mistaken promotion of white middle class values as the standard by which all families are judged. In his book, Toward a Black Psychology, White describes how white and black researchers can observe the same behavior or environment and interpret them differently. During the visit to a black home, researchers may find familiar aspects of white culture, such as the Book of the Month selection, magazines like Harper's, or records of Broadway classics. This type of observation leads to the assumption that black children's homes are weak in intellectual content, somehow failing to see the intellectual stimulation from local newspapers, Jet and Ebony magazines, and informative rapping. Nonetheless, White is categorical in his attitude towards white mainstream psychology. He argues that not all traditional white psychological theory is useless. What is critical, White argues, is the need in developing a black psychology to incorporate what is useful in mainstream psychology and discard the rest. Equally alarmed by the dominant and harmful effects of Western thought and a need for psychological liberation under conditions of oppression is William Cross, another adherent of the reformist school. He designed a model for understanding a racial identity development in his book called Shades of Black. According to Cross's model, referred to as the psychology of negrescence, there are 5 stages of racial identity development: the pre-encounter, encounter, immersion, internalization, and internalization and commitment. In the first stage, the black child is attracted to many of the beliefs and values of the dominant white culture, including the idea that white is right. The black child's transition to the encounter stage is hurried by an event or series of events that force the young person to acknowledge the impact of racism on his or her psychological makeup. The next stage is characterized by a strong desire in the black child or young adult to identify with the symbols of his or her racial identity. At the next stage of psychological development, the young black individual is energized by the new information and learning, which makes them angry perhaps because such information and learning was not available to them sooner. This is how Beverly Tatum, a leading contemporary black female psychologist, academic, and college president, characterizes the reaction of young black individuals to such new information and learning in her book, Why Are All the Black Children Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? They become excited to find out there is more to Africa than Tarzan and more to black history than victimization. This stage, that of assimilating new information and learning, is characterized by a heightened sense of security about the evolution of young black adults' own racial identity. During this stage, meaningful relationships are formed across racial boundaries. And there's the last stage, which is described as a sense of racial harmony, where the person is prepared to perceive and transcend race. Cross has revised his theory in recent years, where he concludes that identity change is mixed, not pure, and thus involves carryovers from previous identity, transforming the old into the new, and in the incorporation of new things. Unlike the traditional and reformist schools, the radical school focuses attention on the black community and makes no demand on mainstream white society. The radical school has developed a system of psychology that is rooted in the African worldview by rejecting white mainstream ideas. According to Karanga, the members of this school are socially conscious theorists and practitioners who advocate self-conscious participation of black psychologists and black people into the transformation of social reality through cultural and political struggle. Naim Akbar, an outspoken member of the radical school, has criticized many of the principles and attitudes of both white mainstream and black traditional psychologists of the traditional school. Akbar targets Clark, Greer, and Cobbs for following the lead of Caucasian scholars in both conceptualizing and analyzing problems, and particularly condemns Greer and Cobb's Black Rage as a guide for the neurotic Negro. Akbar also criticizes the white oppressor scientists who have acquired great scholarly renown for documenting deficits of African Americans. One of Akbar's interesting theories provides a reading of 4 disorders that in this view threatens black life and development. He categorizes them as anti-life forces. The alien self disorder, which makes afflicted black individuals pursue socialization with others than members of his or her own race. The anti-self disorder, characterized by covert hostility of the afflicted towards black people in general, a disorder that leads to hatred of oneself. The self-destructive disorder, defined as a retreat from reality through the abuse of drugs, alcohol, and other intoxicants. Then organic disorders, defined as physiological, neurological, or biochemical malfunctions. Drawing on the work of a pioneering African-American psychologist, Wade Nobles, Akbar states that all of these disorders emanate from a psychopathic society typified by oppression and racism. As a highly regarded pioneer noted for deploying Africanist philosophy as a foundation of black psychology, Noble states that Africanist philosophy shows numerous essential ideas that not only provide an explanation of African philosophy, but African and black psychology as well. In his book, African Philosophy, Noble argues that the central problem with Western psychological resides in the foundation, beginning with a critique of the Freudian theories based on Greek philosophy and mythology. Noble draws attention to the limitations of mythological tales upon which Freud built his theories. From the Orphic mysteries, for example, Freud developed his notions of the Oedipal complex and the processes of its unfolding. It was from these Freudian appropriations of the Orphic mystery that he developed his theories of sexuality in male children, identifying the child's sexual feeling of anxiety and relation as responses to perceived threats against his genitals by his father. Noble also discusses how critical readings of Greco-Roman and Judeo-Christian modifications of ancient African thought are essential for understanding the inadequacies of Western psychology. And as a distinct discipline within the broader prospectus of Africana studies, both the scholastic and therapeutic practices of psychology by African American professionals focuses rather intensely on a particular part of our society, the Black community. Black psychology, according to Karenga, shares with Africana studies a critical concern with questions of identity, alienation, self-concept, mental health, and the development of the Black perspective. This perspective can broaden the field of psychology in a way that provides the models for systematic study of other minorities.